Hello everyone. Sorry this video is a bit late. The weekend kind of just ran away from me and then I fell asleep last night before I edited the video. So yes. Anyway, so this video is about, it's a more finished illustration than I usually have on my channel. Usually I do a lot of sketch with me type videos where I draw in my sketchbook. But today I'm doing I'm showing you guys an illustration that I had to do for my illustration class. So I did it on really nice watercolor paper. It's Fabriano cold press paper. I'll put it in the link below. It's the smooth watercolor paper. Not in the link below, in the description box. All of the materials that I use will be there if anyone's interested in looking at that. So the illustration that I did is a little bit more finalized than what I usually do. So it took a lot more time, which is why the video is a little bit longer than usual, but not too long. So what I'm doing here is kind of outlining the fish, and I'm switching between real time and then fast forwarded. Like here I'm doing this in real time. I just wanted to give some people the idea of how slowly it is that this actually comes together, because I know when I'm watching a lot of speed paintings, I see all the stuff and I'm like, oh, they're so good and so amazing, but it's always interesting to see how slowly or quickly the artist usually works. Anyway, so that's just what I'm doing here. And then I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the illustration, because looking at it, it's kind of a bit random, but basically the illustration is about my cat who only eats kibble and then these things. I don't know if they have them in the rest of the world, but they're called lucky star pilchards, and basically they're like these little pilchard fish things that they put in tomato sauce, and we just discovered that my cat loves them, and this is what the illustration is about, just to give you guys a little bit of context. So what I tried to do with the illustration is to try indicate lucky star pilchards without saying lucky star pilchards in the illustration. So on the packaging, the main colors are red, blue, and yellow. So those are the colors that I use in the illustration. And they also have the same kind of fish on the front of the packaging that I draw everywhere. So that's pretty much what I'm doing. So I do cut out a little bit of the fish drawing illustration things just because it took a really long time, and I figured once you've seen me draw one or two fishes, you've pretty much seen me draw them all, because I do them all the same way, like the way that it's done on the packaging. So I just wanted to give kind of an idea of what I was doing with the fish and then move on to the other bits of the illustration. Otherwise we'd be sitting here for like half an hour watching me draw fish. So hopefully you guys don't mind that. But yeah, so here is kind of an idea of what it looks like with all the fish finished. So I've just done yellow, red, and blue. I try to keep the yellow kind of minimal because it's a little bit hard to see. So now I've started to draw my cat. So here in the bottom left, you can see me using my phone. It's just a picture that I took of my cat a while ago. That I'm just using as reference, because I've discovered that it's difficult to draw convincing stripes on cats without reference, because the thing about the stripes on cats is they follow the curves of the cat's body. It's not like they're just straight and whatever. You'll see in a little bit how much the stripes actually add to the shape of the cat, so it gives it a lot of roundness and a lot of form. So if you are drawing stripy cats, either it can be super stylized and you can draw whatever stripes you want, but I wanted to keep this one kind of realistic, so I was using a reference image, which might be a good tip for you guys to use. So there I was just erasing all the pencil marks while I was waiting for the fur to dry, the grey to dry. So for the grey I used ink instead of watercolour, mostly just because ink stays where it's put. So by that I mean, sometimes with watercolour, if you go over it again, it'll lift up depending on if the colour's really thick or the paint you're using. Some colours don't do it as much as others. I have absolutely no idea why. It's just what I found. So I wanted to use black ink just so that when I went over it and then I did the stripes and then I was going to go back in and do more shading, I didn't want the stripes to move around too much, so that's why I'm using ink. Also, it was kind of easier for me just to use ink than watercolor because I didn't have a black watercolor that was open. I had to open a new tube, so I was lazy and I just used my ink. But yeah, I'm really, really proud of this illustration. I think it turned out really well. I also tried some new stuff, because usually what I do is I sketch it in my sketchbook, then I paint over the sketch, and then I'm done. But for this one, the process got a little bit more complicated because I sketched it on like really crappy paper, like really thin, normal paper, because sometimes watercolor paper doesn't do so well if you erase a lot on it. So sketching on watercolor paper is a little bit like difficult. So if I'm sketching and I erase and sketching and I erase, especially if I'm struggling with any kind of the composition, it gets a bit, the paper gets a bit ruined almost. Not ruined, but like you can still see the indents of the old pencil lines and stuff like that. So what I did was I sketched on really crappy paper, then I traced it onto my nice paper using a light box. And then I started painting on the nice paper. So I had to do a series of I didn't have to, I chose to do a series of illustrations for the illustration project. So this is just one of. If you are interested in seeing the other illustrations, I'm going to post them on Instagram today, so you can always go and check that out if you feel like it. My Instagram link will be in the description box and at the end of the video. It'd be super cool if you check that out. Then here I'm just kind of painting all the stripes in, but you can see how much of a difference the stripes have made to the shape of the cat without very much shading. So I'm just doing the stripes here, and then after they're dry I'll go back in and add like here I'm doing it, I'm adding darker color to give it like more defined shape, because I wanted the fish in the background to form kind of like a flat pattern and be much more stylized, and then the cat in the foreground to be not very realistic, but much more realistic than the fish and stuff like that. So that's pretty much why I'm doing what I'm doing. And then after I finish the cat and the fish it's holding, and then the circle around the cat, I'm going to be using masking fluid, which was an interesting experience because I actually have never used masking fluid before this illustration. So I was basically just in the shops the other day because I needed to get some more paints, and I just saw it in passing, and I've watched a couple other YouTubers use it and I really like what they can do with it. So I thought, you know what, it's not very expensive, let me just buy it, see what it's about. I don't know if it's the greatest brand of masking fluid, but it was there and it was like cheap, so I bought it. And then for this illustration, I wasn't originally planning to use it. I was planning to leave the background white with the fish, but then looking at it more and more, I was like, it needs something. Don't know what it needs, but it needs a thing. And so what I did was, I have never tried this before in my life. So in the top right hand corner of the rest of the page, I kind of did some experiments off camera just to see how it worked. And then I scanned my drawing in once I was happy with it. Once I got to the point where the cat's done, the bubble's done, the fish is done, the fish are done. And I was kind of happy with the illustration. I scanned it in case I fucked it up. So here you see the experiments as well as the masking fluid that I'm using. So I didn't, so I scanned it in case it turned out horribly, and I could still use it for my project that I needed to hand in. So I'll show you the comparison between the before I put on the masking fluid and like finished off the painting, and the after I put on the masking fluid and finished the paint. What? Yeah, so the before and the after for the masking fluid. Sorry about my head, by the way. It's really difficult to use masking fluid because I was doing this at night and I couldn't see what I was doing because it was so shiny. So I had to put my head like straight over to avoid glare. So anyway, you can kind of see it here. So basically the way masking fluid works, if you've never used it, is it's basically like this latex liquid stuff. And then you can put it over or on a piece of paper or whatever. I've put it over the fish because I wanted to keep the fish white, but I wanted to paint the background blue, and it's difficult to get a nice smooth background if you have to paint around everything super carefully. So masking fluid works, so you put it down on the paper, and then when you paint over it, you peel the masking fluid off at the end, and then the paper underneath stays white or whatever color it was before you put on the masking fluid. So here what you can see is I'm painting the whole background blue because I wanted to do like a gradient type thing from dark blue at the bottom to very light blue at the top, almost like the fish are in water kind of thing. So I kind of tried to mostly stay around the masking fluid in the beginning, just because it was a little bit easier, because I could like section it that way and then I could dip more paint, etc, etc. But then you'll see as I progress towards the end, I just kind of get like less and less precious about it, because I think I kind of figured it out that it was working. I just kind of went everything over everything kind of roughly at the end, so I think that's where my gradient really got much better. So if you use watercolors, or really any paint, but I know that masking fluid works specifically or well with specifically watercolors, I would definitely highly suggest using masking fluid. It makes keeping areas white much easier, and because of that you can get smoother gradients, stuff like that. So if it is something that you haven't tried, I would definitely suggest it. It's an interesting experience to say the least. I was stressing a lot especially when I did this. I'm just painting over the fish and I'm like, they're never going to be white. And when I was putting on the masking fluid, it kind of picked up some of the watercolor color and made the fish kind of the color that, so if it had red outline, the whole fish went red, like here you can see it. And I was stressing a lot about that. So now I'm just peeling off the masking fluid, and you can do it by rubbing it, but I didn't want to smudge any of the watercolor in the background, because sometimes that happens. Sometimes the watercolor kind of sits on top of the page, and if you rub your finger over it, it'll smudge kind of like colored pencil. So I just kind of used tweezers and tried to pull it up as neatly as I pulled it up as neatly as I could. It took a while, so I just filmed the one fish to give you guys an example of kind of what it was like. Also, I had to kind of bribe my brother to do it. To hold the camera for me. So any more than one fish would have been a bit much for him. Also, he would have been sitting there for like half an hour holding the camera. So one fish was kind of the limit. So I must say though, pulling up masking fluid is super satisfying. You know how like when you pull masking tape off your painting and it comes up so beautifully and cleanly and you're like, yes, this is amazing. It's the same thing with masking fluid. This isn't like the best example, but I think I did one or two fish where the whole thing came off in one foul swoop and it was glorious. I don't know why my voice is disappearing. Yay. But yeah, I really hope you guys enjoyed watching this illustration and that you learned something from it or found it interesting, because it's a little bit different or a little bit more finalized than the stuff I usually post on my YouTube channel. So I hope you enjoyed it, learned something from it. I definitely learned something from it. I learned that I actually really like masking fluid, and expensive watercolor paper is much nicer than sketchbook watercolor paper. I might become a paper snob. It's problematic because I'm also poor. But yeah, I hope you guys learned something, found it interesting. I hope you guys like the way the illustration turned out, because I really like it. In a little bit here, after I finish like fiddling with the remains of the masking fluid. Oh, and you can also feel it. So when you rub your fingers over the masking fluid, even though you can't see it because when it's dry, it goes kind of clear. I mean, it's shiny, but it goes clear. You can feel where there's still masking fluid. So that's kind of what I was doing in the end there. And then here's the comparison between before and after. I personally like the after, but you guys can let me know in the comments down below which one you prefer. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you next week. Bye.